Sorry, the gentleman's here saying there was a second part of his question. Remind me what that was. 50-year-olds. Well, I mean, we've got an issue in Scotland. You hear a lot about, and I think the guy here with the live streaming was referring to it. We hear a lot about we've got an ageing population, and we can't afford to pay for the ageing population. But we're not alone in having an ageing population. Okay, countries across the world have got ageing populations because they're all living longer. The point, what we've got a challenge around is our working age population. We don't have enough folk working. Partly that's because there's not enough opportunities. Partly it's because women can't get into work because they don't have childcare for their children. So if you're 50, you've got a massive contribution still to make to the economy and to society. And we need to make sure the opportunities are there for people of all ages to work and make that contribution.
Tommy Brennan, the ex-convener, Ravenscraig Works. Nicola, in November 2013, the Westminster Parliamentary Taxation Group made their report to the House of Commons, and part of that report was, in the event of a no vote, well, the Barnett formula had to be immediately abolished and replaced with the Hotham Commission recommendations. The Hotham Commission recommendations, if applied to Scotland, would cost Scotland £4 billion in their funding. But the worrying factor about all this is that, having read that, I decided that I would have a look and see what was the composition of this parliamentary taxation, all-party taxation group. And I found that there were 1 Lib Dem, there were 8 Conservatives, and there were 9 New Labour. I think that is rather worrying in respect of if there was a no vote and New Labour was elected at Westminster, would the Barnett formula be safe in their hands? Or in fact, would it be safe in any of their hands?
I just want to know what actual benefits I would benefit from if Scotland went independent. I'm a student now and I currently work, and I just want to know, like, am I going to be any better off than what I'm at just now? Because from what I read on it, I just can't see it. And also, with regards to like the EU, I see if Scotland are going to be the 14th, what is it, richest country like in the world or whatever. How come the EU haven't actually, in the UK are 18th, how come we're not being guaranteed access to the EU?
Hi Nick, I'm Will Manderson from Motherwell. My question is, how will companies who have got offices based in Scotland but their main headquarters or they're run from England, what impact will that have on the Scottish offices and companies up here?
Okay. Tommy, your question about the Barnett formula is a good one. For folk here who don't maybe know what the Barnett formula is, maybe everybody knows what the Barnett formula is, it's the method by which the Scottish Government is funded right now. So it's how the block grant that Westminster, from our money, gives to the Scottish Government every year. And you've got people in all the UK parties that say they want to get rid of the Barnett formula or amend the Barnett formula. And if there's a no vote, it's likely that one of those two things will happen. And what Tommy's pointing out is there's been an independent group looked at this and say that if you replace the Barnett formula with what they're saying should replace the Barnett formula, that would cost Scotland about £4 billion every year. Now that's a massive amount of money. You know, the total budget of the health service in Scotland is £12 billion every year. So that's one of the risks that faces us if we vote no, that our budget will be cut, it will be subject to decisions taken at Westminster. I think it makes a lot more sense for us to have a situation where we pay our taxes, they go to a Scottish Treasury, and we in Scotland, through how we vote, decide how that money is used, so that Westminster can't be the ones that decide how much of our own money we get back to spend. And that's, you know, something that only a yes vote can bring into being. So I didn't catch your name, Laura. You asked me about the EU. I'll come on to your main question in a second. I think we are guaranteed to stay in the EU. We're in the EU. We've been part of the EU for 40 years. I said earlier on all the reasons why it would be crazy for the rest of the EU to have Scotland outside of the European Union. You asked why are we not being given that guarantee by Europe? Well, the European Commission, which is the body that kind of governs the European Union, one of the bodies that governs the European Union, some months ago, it's probably 18 months ago now, they said that they would give their opinion on what would happen if Scotland voted yes, but they would only do so if the current member state asked them for that opinion. Now, the current member state is the United Kingdom government. It's Westminster, David Cameron, and they're refusing point blank to ask that question. We've asked them to. Now, ask yourself why they don't want to ask that question. Because they don't know that they'll like the answer, which is probably, of course, Scotland will continue to be a member of the European Union. So that's why there's uncertainty. There's a general point to be made here. It's in the interests of those on the no side of this campaign. I'm not being critical here, I'm just pointing out a fact. It's in the interests of them to be in the business of stirring up as much uncertainty as possible, because they figure if you go into the polling booth feeling uncertain about things, you're more likely to vote no. So they don't want to give you information that will help you be more certain. They want you to stay uncertain, and that's the reason.
Did the European Union not make really most of the decisions for the country anyway?
Well, there's a debate to be had, and there are some people. Look, sir, just let me answer the lady's question, okay? Yeah, well, I'll talk to you at the end. Very nicely. There are people who think, not just in Scotland, people across the UK who think we'd be better off outside the European Union. That's a legitimate opinion. I don't share it. I don't agree with it. I think Scotland benefits from being in the European Union because of the single market, the trading opportunities that gives us access to. But I think it would be far better for Scotland to be in the European Union as an independent country, because then we speak with our own voice. We've got our own votes around the decision-making tables in Europe. I mean, let me give you an example of how it works right now. Fishing's a big industry in Scotland. Not in Motherwell, but in Scotland as a whole, fishing's a really big industry. It's an important industry in England, but it's not as important in England as it is in Scotland. My colleague in the Scottish Government, the fishing minister, he's got to go to Brussels to take part in discussions about fishing. He's not allowed to speak in those meetings unless the UK government gives him permission to speak. Now, that's just no way of representing yourself. Europe's not perfect. Europe needs a lot of change. It needs to do things differently. But are we not going to be better able to argue for that change if we speak with our own voice, if we're allowed to speak at all and speak with our own voice? So being in there as an independent country, arguing our case, fighting our corner, is a far better way than the case right now. Now, people can argue we should be outside of the European Union altogether, and you're perfectly entitled to argue that position. I don't believe that's right for Scotland. You know, there's a lot of jobs in Scotland created by the fact that we're in the European single market and can trade across the whole of the European Union without barriers to trade. So I think that's a big benefit, and I think it's worth being in the European Union. But where I agree with you is we should be in there arguing for the things we want to happen in Europe, not being sitting here having to put up with whatever the UK government decides is best on our behalf. You asked me also about benefits. Let me just make a general point here, and then I'll give you what I think are some of the benefits. Now, whether the law, I don't know all your circumstances, so I don't know whether the law will apply to you, but I'm just going to give you some of what I think the benefits are. But if we vote to be independent in September, then 18 months later, when we become independent, there'll be an election. And you can vote for the SNP, you can vote Labour, you can vote Tory, you can vote whoever you like. And it will depend to some extent on who wins that election as to what policies they decide to have and how they use the powers of independence. So what I'm about to say to you right now is what I would do if I was in government and we were independent. So being independent gives us the chance. We've got free you're a student. I don't know whether you're a student at college or university, whether you're a first-time student, but generally we've got free education in Scotland, and I want us to be able to protect that. But I've just spoken about I've just spoken about some of the cuts we will face if we're not independent. If we're not independent, it will get harder and harder to protect these kind of things. So being in charge of our own resources, our own money, being the ones that decide how we spend our own money, allows us to protect free education, it allows us to protect free health care, free prescriptions, things like that. Also gives us control over things like the minimum wage. Right now, the minimum wage, what the lowest paid people in society get paid, that's decided at Westminster. The minimum wage over the last 5 years hasn't even kept pace with the cost of living. So the poorest people are getting poorer. We've given a guarantee that if we control the minimum wage, it at least will go up every year in line with the cost of living, so we can make sure people get a decent wage for a decent day's work. Childcare is the other thing. If we get control over tax and spending, we can invest in childcare. We want to have comprehensive childcare so that from the age of 1, children will get the same hours of entitlement to childcare as kids get in primary school, so that women are more able to go to work without having to spend, most of their wages on paying for childcare. And as women work, they pay taxes. Right now, all that money goes to George Osborne. If your taxes come to a Scottish government, then we get the benefits of enabling more women to work. So there's lots of energy costs, for example. We've got proposals that would take some of the cost of your electricity bill down, because there's a lot of things funded through your electricity bill just now that we don't think should be funded through your electricity bill. It should be funded by government through general taxation. We can't do anything about it. If we were able to do something about it, we could take 70 quid a year off some people's energy bills. Now, these are just a few of many examples of what becomes possible if we hold the powers to decide these things. Now, how successful we are as a country 10 years from now, 20 years from now, will come down to how good we are at making decisions and how well we use our resources. But do we really believe that we are not going to make a better job of that than George Osborne and David Cameron in Westminster? I think we absolutely are. And the route to making Scotland better off and to making everybody in Scotland better off is to give ourselves the control over the things that determine that. Companies, where's Lorna? Was it Lorna or Laura? Wilma, I got it completely wrong. Wilma, companies that have got a base in Scotland but are headquartered elsewhere, there's no reason at all why they don't continue to operate in Scotland. If you cast your mind back, I don't know if you remember the time before the referendum to set up the Scottish Parliament, and the one before that when we didn't vote, well, we did vote to have a Scottish Parliament but we didn't get one. I don't remember that one quite so clearly. But all the companies that are starting to kind of make it sound as if they would think about leaving, no companies actually said they would leave Scotland if we voted for independence, incidentally. But, making it sound as if they might. Many of these companies said the same before we had a Scottish Parliament. But they didn't leave because actually Scotland was and remains a good place to do business. That will be the case after we're independent as well. I went to speak to one of the companies whose senior management is not pro-independence, the Weir Group, which has its headquarters in Glasgow. The Weir Group operates in 71 countries around the world. Is anybody really suggesting that having to operate in 72 independent countries instead of 71 is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back there? Companies are used to operating across international borders and boundaries. That's how the world operates. And companies will continue to operate in Scotland because we're a good place to do business. We've got folk who are good customers for them. That's why they want to stay here. And we'll have governments that have the ability to, if they so choose, make it worth their while. Make it, we propose lower corporation tax, for example, to encourage more businesses to come into Scotland to create more jobs. Businesses will go where it makes good business sense for them to be, and they'll stay where it makes good business sense, and Scotland will make good business sense for businesses. As it does now, it will continue to do so in the future.